Kahani Bar brings you a cocktail of stories in English and in Hindustani. I am Richa, and today's story is from Fauji Heart, a collection of human stories with the backdrop of Indian Army. Written for you by Neerja K. These stories will sometimes bring a smile and sometimes a tear, but they will always allow you to peek into the lives of the human beings who are often hidden behind that stiff uniform. Our story for the day is
The Lawn Mower. It was 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and the doorbell rang long and shrill in Captain K.K. Sethi's house. The scream of the doorbell pierced through the closed door of the master bedroom and through the soft pillow that K.K. held tightly around his head, covering his ears to shut out the little sounds that were trickling in from the kids' room. He reached out blindly and pulled one more pillow over his ears, not realizing that another head had been resting on it. His wife, who was still in a state of slumber, grumbled but let go of her pillow. Before the doorbell had rung, the Sethi household had been experiencing unusual peace and quiet for this time of day. This tranquility was reserved only for Sunday mornings. On weekdays, the Sethi family was up at 5:30 a.m. The day started half an hour earlier for the lady of the house, Ramola Sethi. KK needed his bed tea at 5:30 a.m. He had to report for his morning PT at 6 a.m. The kids had to leave for school at 7 a.m. along with their lunch boxes, and KK would be back for his change of gear and breakfast almost at the same time. Ramola seemed to be on a roller coaster ride the whole morning, juggling KK and the kids till she saw the trio off. Besides her husband and the two kids, Soumya, who was 6, and Shubham, who was 10, she also had a few pets to look after. Not many, just 2 dogs, 4 of their pups from a recent litter, a little baby goat that Soumya had adopted from a shepherd who brought his flock for grazing in the nearby expanse of open army land, and finally the rooster couple with their 10 chicks. Then there was a family of mongoose living in the backyard who was also fed scraps from the kitchen. Yet she found time to teach in the welfare school run by the local army establishment for the children of the Jawans for 3 hours each day from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Sunday was her day, and she usually did not get up till 8:30 a.m. or thereabouts. KK's story was different. He was always starved for sleep. This was a universal phenomenon in the lives of all infantry soldiers. But KK went to the extent of keeping a sort of debit-credit ledger of his sleep in his mind, and his calculations were unbelievably accurate. The doorbell shrieked again. Shortly after that, there was a knock at their bedroom door. It was their daughter Soumya at the door, yelling at the 8th octave, "Get up, Papa! The lawn mower is here for you!" "No, I have not sent for him. Your mom must have called him for your brother," replied KK, still not wanting to open his eyes. "No, Papa! He says that he has come for you. Open the door and come out. Don't be a coward. Be the soldier that you are," challenged little Soumya, who loved to act like a mother to him. She started a rhythmic thumping on the door. Ramola opened her eyes and mumbled in her sleepy voice, "Go on, KK, get up and face him and handle the situation. Please, please, I need 10 more minutes of sleep. I'll be there soon with your tea. Now be a darling and go, please." Without opening his eyes, KK flung his legs over the side of the bed and his feet started to wander on the floor in search of his slippers. He sat up and stretched his arms, trying to reach for the dressing gown that should have been there, somewhere on the chair. With his eyes still not fully open, his feet finally found the slippers and his hands the dressing gown. As he reluctantly stood up and slipped into the dressing gown, he muttered to himself, "But I never sent for him. It must be the old man's doing again." Rubbing his eyes, he opened the door. Soumya dashed into the room and onto the bed to cuddle with her mother. KK came out into the living room and yelled for Shubham, who came running out of his room. "Good morning, Papa!" "Good morning, son. Now be a good boy and go out into the backyard and entertain the lawn mower." Shubham became alert. "Papa, my lawn is perfect. He has come for you. He told me so." "But I never sent for him." "Fine, you go back to your room. There must be some misunderstanding. Let me resolve this mystery." He walked over to the back door and opened it. As he stepped out, he saw the ruthless lawn mower had set up his shop perfectly, his arsenal well displayed. Yes, it was the unit barber. Lawn mower was the code name given to him by the family. One of the very few things that KK did not like about being in the army was the short crew cut that they were expected to support all the time, no matter what style came and went in the rest of the world. KK loved to wear his hair longish. He did have a thick crop that he was proud of. His peers could not boast of the same. In 3 days, he was proceeding on annual leave. They were going to their hometown for a wedding in the family, and he surely did not want to get a haircut just before that. He had been able to grow his sideburns and the rest of it in the style that was in, the Rishi Kapoor style in Bobby. He ran his fingers lovingly through his tresses. He had worked hard to stay out of the CEO's visual firing range during the last few weeks. The CEO did not have a single blade of hair on his nut. In fact, because of long years of exposure to the sun, it had acquired a walnut-like hue. His bald head shone like a polished wooden banister or bedpost. KK believed that it was the trauma of this total hair loss at a young age that had driven the CEO to send the lawn mower to his house with such vengeful regularity. It had to be jealousy. Whenever he would bump into him, his salute would be answered by 2 statements: short, precise, and curt. "Button up your shirt and get a haircut." Smart salute though. "But sir, I just got a hair." KK would mildly try to protest while pretending to button the few top buttons of his uniform shirt. By then, the CO would be halfway down the corridor, leaving him exasperated. And without fail, the lawn mower would knock on his door the following Sunday morning. This time, in anticipation of his annual leave and the upcoming marriage functions, he had made sure that no such encounter took place. He had volunteered for all kinds of duties that would keep him from crossing paths with the CO. While his strategy had been successful, there had been an unforeseen development. KK was actually supposed to have proceeded on his annual leave the week before, but because of the upcoming brigade commander's inspection, he had volunteered to postpone his leave. Suddenly, he had a sinking feeling. Is that why the lawn mower was here today? There was no way that he would be allowed to wear his hair this length for the commander's inspection. He walked out to the backyard, no longer confident that the lawn mower's presence was a misunderstanding. But he quizzed the barber with a fake bluster. "Who have you come for? I did not send for you. Someone else must have called you, and you have come here by mistake. Now please wind up your shop and go." The lawn mower clicked his heels and said, "Sir, I have come by the CEO Saab's hukum. Did you hear the name correctly? He must have said RK. No, Saab, I have made no mistake. KK stood there, rooted, running his fingers absent-mindedly through his hair. One thing he was sure of. He would not let go of his hair. Not this time. He had nurtured it with such care, and surely he did not want to stick out at the wedding ceremonies like a sore thumb with his crew cut looking like a freshly plucked turkey. No way. His mind was made up. He was a dedicated soldier, but when it came to his hair, he was ultra sensitive. And this time, all the planning and anticipation and the tantalizing opportunity before him of looking normal at a family event had driven him to a state of frenzied attachment to his tresses. Without speaking another word to the lawn mower, he rushed back to his room. He had a hurried shave, got into his PT gear, and dashed out again. Meanwhile, Ramola had finally dragged herself out of bed and had made his tea. He met her in the dining area. "There you are," she called out. "Here is your tea, and now be a good boy and carry out your CEO's orders," mocked Ramola with a flirtatious smile. KK burst out. "Over my dead body. What does he think of himself? He sends the lawnmower as and when he pleases, huh? I have not seen a more sadistic person in my entire life. He's jealous of my hair. I'm telling you, I'm sure of it. He's just jealous of my hair. He knows I'm going on leave. I don't understand what kind of pleasure he's going to derive by ruining my holiday." He was now fiddling with the hat rack, looking for the keys of his Vespa scooter. Ramola followed him to the hat rack, the cup of tea still in her hand. "Where are you going, KK?" "To the bald tiger's den," he said angrily. Ramola was flabbergasted at this uncharacteristic outburst. "Are you out of your mind? What is the matter with you?" "Cool down, KK. What's got into you? You have to calm down. You've drawn your guns out over such a small issue. He is your CO. He could cancel your leave. Worse still, he can ruin your career and make our lives miserable. You know that, right? He's only asking you to have a haircut. That's very much within the rules, and it is his prerogative. You know, you cannot confront him. It would be certain suicide." She tried desperately to reason with him. She maneuvered herself between him and the front door and spoke more softly this time. "Here, have the tea before it gets cold. It will clear your head and help you to cool down." He looked up at her as his hands finally found the keys. For one second, Ramola thought that she saw the angry eyes hesitate. But then, with a quick step to the side, he was past her and through the door. He turned back for a moment just to say, "I will have my tea after I come back. That is, if I come back. Who knows? He might put me in the quarter guard without holding a court of inquiry, or he might decide to scotch me on the spot with those firebrand eyes of his. So if I don't return in 15 minutes, send someone to collect my ashes." Saying this, he kick-started his scooter and took off, leaving a shocked Ramola standing in the driveway, still holding the cup of tea in her hands. Slowly, she walked back into the house. Like a listless zombie, she sank into the nearest chair and started sipping KK's tea absent-mindedly. Shubham, who had been a witness to the entire scene, came and sat down next to his mother. "Mom, what is going to happen now?" "I don't know, my dear, but I do smell trouble. A whole lot of trouble. Maybe the CEO will cancel your father's annual leave. Or worse, maybe he charges him for insubordination." She was too shocked to think about playing down the consequences for Shubham's sake. She kept sipping the tea nervously. Soumya came and hugged her mother reassuringly. However, disappointment was writ large on her little face. She tried to calm her mother. "Don't worry, Mama. We will not go for the vacation this year. Should I unpack my bag and set my clothes and books back in the cupboard?" Ramola barely heard her, but hugged her back. Shubham snubbed his sister. "I wonder how you little girly brain functions. It always thinks negative." Soumya, still very tense, replied, "Bhaiya, I was only trying to save time so that we can go out to play later." "How can you think of playing when Mama is so worried for Papa?" he shot back. Ramola suddenly gathered her wits and turned to the kids. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Now stop arguing, the two of you, okay? And Shubham, girls' brains are as good as boys, if not better. So don't let me hear you say such things again. Now, come to the dining table and I will get you your breakfast." Soumya, forever her papa's pet, objected. "No, Mama, I will wait for Papa." "You will do no such thing. I will wait for him. You two come to the table and sit for your breakfast," ordered Ramola firmly, leaving no scope for any further discussion. Ramola, still worried to death, walked to the kitchen sink to wash her hands. Through the kitchen window that opened into the backyard, she overheard the conversation between the lawn mower and KK's Sahayak. To her utter astonishment, they were actually betting as to what the CEO's decision was going to be. A new wave of anxiety washed over her. She felt like giving the two men a piece of her mind, but then thought better of it. She went through the motions of fixing the kids' breakfast, but her eyes kept wandering back to the kitchen clock time and again. The eggs, toast, and fruit all made their way to the dining table, but there was no sign of her husband. The kids finished eating and KK had still not returned. The lawnmower and the Sahayak had finally lost interest in predicting KK's future and were now discussing the recent performances of the Indian cricket team. Still, there was no sign of her husband. She wondered if she should send the Sahayak to the CEO's house to find out what was happening there. But then she decided against it and went about her housework, keeping a keen eye on the kitchen clock. She continued to weigh the pros and cons of sending the Sahayak to get some news. Nearly an hour had lapsed, and she was on the verge of calling out to the Sahayak when she heard the familiar grumble of the scooter pulling up into the driveway. Before KK could ring the bell, she and the kids had dashed to the front door. As she flung the door open, she saw KK wiping his shoes on the doormat. Dismay and anger were taking turns flashing across his face. He quietly hung his helmet and the scooter keys on their respective pegs on the hat rack and went in. Ramola followed him with great concern. The kids knew that at such times it was best to leave the two of them alone, and they quietly withdrew to their room. "What happened? Please tell me. I'm dying with worry," cried Ramola. "His Highness had gone to play golf, so I had to wait for him to return. When he finally came back, I tried to plead my case. The whole time he was listening to me, he had a cynical smile pasted on his face. It's like he was taking special pleasure in seeing me squirm. And after everything I told him, all he had to say was, 'Don't behave like a juvenile. I cannot let the commander see any of my boys with that hairstyle. Go home and free up the barber at the earliest. He has another appointments to keep. Move now, I'm getting late for my breakfast.' And he vanished inside the house. Now I have no choice but to let go of my beautiful locks. I'm sure of one thing. After what's happened today, he's a mean, heartless old monster." Ramola had no words to comfort him. She followed him out to the backyard when she saw the Sahayak passing a 10-rupee note into the palm of the beaming lawn mower. KK settled down for his haircut, his body taut with anger and frustration. He ran his hands lovingly through his tresses one last time as the lawnmower started to sharpen his tools. He placed a mirror in front of KK and started to spray some water into his locks to get them ready for the sacrificial altar. KK washed those fingers in what felt like slow motion. He followed the lawnmower's careful, practiced movements as he ran his fingers through KK's precious crop. While the strokes were slow and almost tender, KK knew that soon enough the scissors would descend on his head and within seconds the crop would be harvested. As she watched this pitiful scene unfold, Ramola heard the doorbell ring, but didn't pay much attention as she knew the Sahayak had gone back in and would answer the door. She felt she had to stay close at hand to offer some comfort to KK once the deed was done. The Sahayak trotted out into the yard accompanied by the DR, the dispatch rider, from the unit lines. The DR had brought a circular that KK read out loud. The Commander Sahab has contracted food poisoning and the inspection has been called off indefinitely. KK jumped up instantly and shoved the lawnmower's hands aside. He threw the towel that had been draped across his shoulders and ran his fingers triumphantly through his crowning glory and broke into a jig. Soumya and Shubham, who had rushed out on hearing the commotion, also joined in. The lawnmower started packing his deadly instruments, while the Sahayak snapped his fingers and held his palm out. The lawnmower reluctantly passed the 10-rupee note back to him. The Sahayak snapped his fingers again, and the lawnmower painfully took out another tenner and handed it over. The Sahayak beamed triumphantly. KK looked at Ramola and said, "That explains the cynical smile that was pasted on the CEO's face when I was petitioning him. He must have known about this, and yet he still insisted on my haircut. What if the DR had been a few minutes late?" But what KK didn't know was that the CEO had received the news of the postponement only after KK's morning visit and had made sure to rush the DR to KK's house first and only then to the other officers, even though KK was further down the chain of command. The CEO wasn't a heartless monster after all. His heart was just well camouflaged.
This is Richa signing off. Take good care of yourselves till I'm back with the next story.